was really surprised by Jake's behavior after my mom's funeral. Instead of offering condolences, he bluntly asked me about my mother's inheritance. I think he noticed me checking her passbook. Is the inheritance being transferred soon? How much is it? He asked eagerly. I told him it was around $600,000. He seemed disappointed and muttered to himself about how even after taxes, a lot would still be left. His strange grin made me uneasy. I decided I wouldn't let him control what happened with the money. The next day, I learned Jake was already making plans for the inheritance. But his naive schemes would backfire eventually, even if he didn't realize it. My name is Emma, and Jake is my husband. He's 5 years older and works for a company. We got married through an arranged marriage when I was 20. Jake is the oldest son in his family, and his younger brother, Robert, has been distant since graduating from university. So Jake practically grew up as an only child, and his parents doted on him a lot. To be honest, I never really wanted to marry Jake. My family has a long history in business, and as a privileged daughter, I couldn't go against my parents' wishes. Jake was also expected to take over his family's business. So we ended up together out of duty, not love. Our marriage wasn't happy by society standards. We couldn't have children, despite trying fertility treatments, hoping it would make our lives better. In the beginning, my in-laws were kind, but over time they grew distant and started treating me poorly, calling me lazy and wasting money on medical treatments. My father-in-law would make sarcastic remarks daily, and Jake never stood up for me. He'd just read the newspaper or nap, seeming unconcerned. I wanted to work or leave the house, but Jake dismissed my ideas, saying our business was failing and I couldn't contribute. In those days, once a woman got married, she was expected to be a full-time housewife. Being alone with my mother-in-law was incredibly difficult. No one supported me. I couldn't tell my parents about my struggles, and because our marriage was arranged through work, I couldn't just leave. I held out to hope that things would improve and endured each day, but nothing changed over the years. After 20 years of marriage, when I was almost 40, my father-in-law died unexpectedly in an accident. It was then revealed that his company had been avoiding taxes, leading to bankruptcy and the loss of our wealth. Even the life insurance we had on him was gone. Our once prosperous life was just a memory, and I worried about Jake finding a new job at 45. Luckily, my parents helped him find work through their connections. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law aged rapidly and became physically frail, no longer able to criticize me. Eventually, she suffered a stroke and needed constant care. In this chaotic situation, I couldn't even think about getting pregnant at 40. I had already given up on that dream long ago. Jake, however, acted as if it were natural for me to take care of everything, lounging around on his days off. One day, I gathered the courage to ask him to help care for his mother on his days off, hoping it would lessen my burden. "Hey Jake, could you help with taking care of your mother on your days off?" I finally expressed my true feelings. I explained that if he could handle just one meal, it would make a huge difference for me. Jake's response was dismissive and selfish. He insisted that he needed to relax on his days off because he worked hard outside the home. He didn't understand the challenges I faced every day. My parents noticed my distress and urged me to come back home, but I couldn't leave my mother-in-law alone. We only had in-home care once a week, and the daily care she needed was too much for just me to handle. Despite being ridiculed and taken advantage of, I couldn't abandon my mother-in-law. Gradually, Jake started leaving early in the morning, even on his days off, seemingly uncomfortable under my watchful eye. He spread rumors to the neighbors, complaining that I criticized him for relaxing at home. Meanwhile, he enjoyed his free time alone while I took care of his mother. Everyone in the neighborhood knew she needed care, yet he acted as if he was doing nothing wrong by leaving it all to me. He didn't seem to care how he looked to others. My mother-in-law, who used to adore Jake, became depressed when she realized he wasn't helping with her care and kept his distance. I'd often received snide remarks about Jake's behavior, as if it were somehow my fault. The challenging life I had caring for my mother-in-law continued for 20 years until she passed away after my father-in-law's death. Now approaching 60, my feelings for Jake have faded, and I've accepted many things. It's hard to leave this house now, and I had imagined growing old here. Jake has worked tirelessly at his job, even after retiring, and continues to contribute as senior staff, which helps us financially. Despite our strained marriage, he hasn't shown any intention of kicking me out, though I doubt he thinks about it anymore. He often leaves the house on his days off, giving me some moments of freedom. Recently, I started a new hobby, pottery. I've made new friends and found happiness in these activities, but Jake disapproves. One day, he angrily burned all my pottery equipment and personal items in the yard, telling me to focus on housework instead. I was devastated by his actions. Although I had considered divorce, another tragedy struck when both my parents suddenly passed away. My brother William took over my father's business, leaving me deeply affected by the losses. The word divorce crossed my mind again, but I realized our journey ahead would be long and difficult. After the funerals, Jake seemed a bit better for about a week, likely mentally exhausted. My pottery friends expressed concern, but Jake sarcastically questioned why I was still in bed grieving, comparing it to his own reaction when his mother passed. While what he said might have some truth, it was hurtful to hear from a grieving wife. The next day, I forced myself to resume my normal routine, though I knew it would take time before I could enjoy my hobbies again. Jake appeared satisfied that things were back to normal. Sometime after my mother's funeral, I remembered the payment deadline for the funeral expenses and was checking my bank book. William was busy with work, so I was handling the financial arrangements. Jacob approached me with a smug grin as he noticed me looking at the bank book. "How much inheritance did you get from your mother?" he asked, without offering any comfort since the funeral. His insensitivity shocked me. While he probably assumed I was checking the inheritance amount, his lack of empathy was too much. I replied, "I received about $600,000, I think." $600,000? That's less than I thought, but even after taxes, a few $100,000 should still remain, huh? Jake mumbled to himself with a sickening grin. I didn't know what he was thinking, but I was determined not to let things go his way. Silently, I put away the bank book. Even Jake seemed to sense the tension and suggested I go to bed early, surprisingly offering comforting words. His behavior was unsettling, and I wanted to avoid him, so I went to my room early that night. The next day, an unexpected event shook me. Jake, as usual, left for work after breakfast, but I received a notification that he hadn't shown up at work. This was the first time since we got married that he had missed work. I panicked, worried that he might have been in an accident, and I frantically tried calling him, but his phone was unreachable. Searching around the house, I found a piece of paper on the table. It was a completed divorce notice signed by Jake. I couldn't believe it. Then, I checked the drawer where I had kept my bank book the day before, and it was gone. Everything became clear. Jake hadn't been in an accident or involved in a crime. He had disappeared intentionally. I realized his motive. He likely intended to abandon me and start a new life with my parents' inheritance. Despite feeling shocked and betrayed, I stayed calm. There was no need to panic. I carefully read through the divorce papers and immediately rushed to the city court to handle the legal matters. Jake had brought this upon himself, and I was determined to make him face the consequences of his actions. I also contacted Jake's company to inform them that I hadn't been able to reach him, and his phone wasn't connecting. I apologized for any inconvenience and requested that they let me know as soon as they heard from him. His colleagues were understanding and assured me that they would mark the day as paid leave for him. I was grateful for their support and thought back to when my father had introduced me to this company, hoping it would provide stability. I felt both hurt and determined to confront Jake for his betrayal and irresponsible behavior. After successfully divorcing Jake, I didn't feel instantly liberated from the years of hardship I endured with him. Reflecting on my life, I realized that if I had made this decision sooner, things might have turned out very differently. While packing my belongings at home, my phone rang. It was Jake calling. Despite knowing it was him, I ignored the calls. His persistence continued, even reaching the point of calling the landline. Reluctantly, I answered. "Hello? I said, trying to remain composed. Emma, why didn't you answer? You didn't go to work, and your workplace called. You need to contact them right away. Jake's voice sounded frantic. This isn't the time to discuss that, I replied, but Jake seemed too agitated to listen. In a panicked voice, Jake then confessed, I can't withdraw money from my mother's bank book. I couldn't help but laugh at his realization. Did you just realize that now? I quipped, holding back my amusement. It seemed Jake hadn't noticed earlier since he hastily stole the bank book and ran off. Well, of course. You burned it the other day, remember? I reminded him, trying to contain my laughter. What? Didn't you know I put it in the bag from my pottery class? I continued, chuckling. I could sense Jake's confusion and panic on the other end of the line. He seemed completely flustered. And what about this bank book? You burned your mother's bank book with no money in it, Jake explained. I don't know. After my mother-in-law passed away, I repeatedly asked you to handle the paperwork, I replied, realizing the irony of the situation. Despite the chaos, I felt a sense of relief and even amusement at Jake's predicament. This phone call highlighted the absurdity of our past struggles together. After Jake's frantic call about the bank book, I went to the bank and learned that nothing could be done because I was not listed on the account. The bank book, which only had a few dollars in it, remained untouched where I had left it. Jake continued to blame me, saying I should have handled his mother's affairs properly. Frustrated, I cut him off, telling him there was nothing he could do with the bank book unless he handled the necessary procedures himself. Jake then went back to the bank counter, attempting to explain the situation while I was still on the line. The bank clerk's voice came through faintly, and I caught a crucial part of their conversation. The clerk telling Jake that they couldn't assist him because we were now strangers due to our divorce. What are you talking about, Jake? We're strangers now. There's no way you can handle the procedures, I interjected, seizing the moment to make it clear that our divorce was finalized and I was no longer involved. I imagined Jake's shocked or angry reaction as I ended the call abruptly. Satisfied with my parting words, I quickly packed my belongings and left the house I had lived in for many years. I headed to my parents' vacant house, which I was set to inherit. My mother, who ran a company, had amassed assets totaling over $8 million. This inheritance represented a new beginning for me after finally breaking free from the challenges I faced with Jake. After inheriting around $600,000 for living expenses and managing the family home, which was filled with sentimental items like my mother's dresses and my father's antiques, I felt a sense of relief. My brother William, who had married and had children, took over the family company. We agreed that I would manage the family home while he received the cash inheritance, and this arrangement went smoothly without any disputes. Once I safely arrived at my family home, I informed my brother about the divorce and my move. He expressed relief, understanding that I needed to move on from my marriage. Why are you okay with that? William asked. Since we couldn't have children and both our parents have passed away, it feels like the right choice. I can finally live my own life without regrets, I explained. William seemed concerned about me being alone, but I reassured him that being divorced and living in our beloved family home brought me the greatest happiness. After that, Jake called me several times on my cell phone, but he never seemed to realize that I was at my parents' home, so he never came over. I enjoyed my alone time, although the house felt a bit lonely without family around. Living in the cherished house where I grew up before marriage gave me a sense of peace and contentment as I embraced this new chapter of my life. Feeling the need to make a bank transfer but realizing I needed the bank book from Jake, I reluctantly went back to our former house. I planned to retrieve it early in the morning while Jake was likely still asleep. However, upon entering, I was hit with the smell of alcohol coming from an open door. I followed the scent to find empty beer cans scattered everywhere in the living room. Shockingly, the bank book I needed was stained and ruined, likely by spilled alcohol. I couldn't believe someone would treat another person's belongings this way, no matter how desperate they might be. I quickly gathered the torn bank book, stuffed it into my bag along with a few personal items, and left. With a damaged bank book, I headed to the bank to complete the transfer. As I approached the entrance, Jake unexpectedly called out to me, "Emma." I turned to see Jake, who had been waiting for me. "I noticed the bank book was gone, so I figured you'd be here," Jake said casually. "What does that have to do with you?" I replied coldly, trying to keep my distance. Ignoring my response, Jake followed me into the bank, staying by my side the entire time. Then, unexpectedly, someone called out to us, "Jake, Emma." It was Jake's younger brother, Robert. His presence was unexpected and surprising since we had mostly cut ties with him over the 40 years of our marriage, only seeing him at funerals. Robert explained that he came for their mother's inheritance and was about to contact Jake after receiving the funds. Jake seemed intrigued by this news, which surprised me. I had assumed their mother's inheritance was relatively small. The encounter was unexpected and added another layer of complexity to the situation, leaving me feeling unsettled as I completed the bank transfer. According to Robert, there were investment trusts and a safety deposit box that his father, my late father-in-law, had rented. Robert had learned about this from his mother before they became estranged. Before she passed away, she asked Robert to handle these matters if necessary, as he had been too busy until now to take care of it. Robert explained to us that in the safety deposit box, along with some jewels, there was a letter. Their mother had stated in the letter that she was leaving all her inheritance to me, Emma. This news shocked me deeply, and Jake appeared even more stunned. Ignoring our reactions, Robert produced the letter from a folder of legal documents. I recognized the envelope. It was one I had bought for her some time ago. On it, in shaky handwriting, was written that all the jewels and assets in the safe deposit box would be inherited by her daughter-in-law, Emma. It was clearly written in my mother-in-law's handwriting. I couldn't help but cover my mouth in disbelief. It seemed she had intended for me to inherit her assets all along, apologizing for her past behavior towards me. Looking at Jake's face, I could see he was shaking with rage. He seemed unable to process this information. Robert, unaware of our divorce, continued, suggesting that I should complete the procedures to officially inherit the assets since I was named as the heir in the letter. He assumed there wouldn't be any issues since I was now the recognized heir. After reissuing the bank book and completing all the necessary procedures, I bid them farewell and left. Later, I received a call from Robert informing me that Jake was causing a fuss, claiming the letter was invalid. This unexpected turn of events added more tension and confusion to the situation, leaving me unsure of what would happen next with my inheritance and my relationship with Jake. It seemed that Jake eventually agreed to follow the wishes outlined in the letter from my mother-in-law after consulting with a lawyer, even though the letter wasn't a formal will. He reluctantly gave up on claiming the house, realizing that the investment trust was tied up in legal matters. Jake then approached me at my parents' house, expressing regret and a desire to start over. However, I firmly reminded him that there was never any love between us and questioned what he truly wanted by suggesting starting over. For the first time, I spoke my mind and expressed what I had been holding back for so long. Jake, unable to respond, remained silent, seemingly regretful. I couldn't help but remark, "At least you were able to inherit the house, huh? By the way, did you contact your company? If you need money that badly, work hard and make sure you don't lose your job." With that, I closed the door, signaling the end of our relationship. In my bank book, there was an inheritance left to me by two mothers, which I believed would allow me to live comfortably until the end. Meanwhile, Jake's despondency led to him forgetting to contact his workplace and getting fired. Reflecting on Jake's situation, I realized that perhaps acting superior to me and maintaining his dignity were the only things motivating him at work. Now that I was gone and there was no hope for the inheritance, he likely felt lost. After spending 40 years together, I felt some concern about Jake's future despite our strained relationship. However, I was determined to move forward and embrace the new chapter of my life with the inheritance left to me. After everything settled down, Robert apologized for the trouble caused by his family and encouraged me to cut ties with Jake completely. Robert had realized from a young age that his family was dysfunctional, so he had chosen to leave home early and live a happier life away from them. Meanwhile, Jake had become reclusive, but should be able to manage with his pension. I decided to return to my pottery class and was warmly welcomed by my friends there. I discovered that enjoying my life without worries could be incredibly fulfilling and fun. During this time, I also had a wonderful encounter at the pottery class. While I used to think I would never marry again, I now believe that spending time with someone who loves you could bring more happiness than being alone forever. I learned through my divorce that it's never too late to find happiness or pursue new experiences in life. There's no such thing as being too late for anything. I believe that regardless of age, one can always find happiness and fulfillment if they remain open to new opportunities and embrace life's possibilities.
My name is Amy Johnson. I used to live with my husband, Michael, and our 5-year-old daughter. One day, I decided to go to a fancy sushi restaurant with my mom, which was something we hadn't done in a while. That day, our daughter was having a sleepover at a friend's house. While we were enjoying the luxurious sushi, I overheard a familiar voice from the private room next door. Nothing beats expensive sushi, right, Michael? You must be happy to eat something delicious for a change. Absolutely. Being forced to eat Amy's terrible cooking all the time, I was really sick of it. Thanks for treating me to such delicious sushi, replied the voice. My mom and I stopped eating and looked at each other. Peeking into the next private room, to my shock, there was my mother-in-law and husband. They were ordering only the expensive items and eating with their elbows on the table. So it's Michael and Mom, I thought. And to speak ill of a daughter-in-law behind her back, that's just rude. They always throw snide remarks at me, even when I'm around, so it's nothing new. I responded with a wry smile. Michael is 3 years older than me and works at a major corporation. I, on the other hand, quit my job to become a full-time housewife after getting married. It was the wish of my husband and mother-in-law that I become a housewife right after our marriage. My mother-in-law started pressuring me to have children soon. Luckily, I was able to conceive easily and found out I was pregnant within 2 months of trying. At first, my mother-in-law was happy about the pregnancy, but her attitude changed drastically when she found out it was a girl. A girl? What were you thinking? I wanted a male hair, she exclaimed. But I can't choose the gender, and girls are cute too, right? I responded, cute girls eventually get married and leave. They're of no benefit to us. Make sure the next one is a boy, she insisted. My husband was also disappointed that our child was a girl. Mom wanted a boy so badly, and you gave birth to a girl. Girls just mean more expenses, he remarked callously. Their hurtful comments continued even after our daughter was born, and things only got worse over time. Our marriage deteriorated, and Michael gradually stopped coming home. Meanwhile, my young daughter worried about our family's situation, thinking it was somehow her fault. Listening to my mother-in-law and husband badmouth me while making eating noises ruined the sushi experience for me. Then, their conversation took a darker turn. So, how's Kate? Is the baby developing well? My mother-in-law asked. Everything seems fine. I can't wait to see my son's face, my husband replied enthusiastically. That's great. Unlike some failures, she got pregnant with a boy on her first try. Maybe it's because she's young, my mother-in-law remarked. Could be. There's nothing better than a young woman. I'm looking forward to starting a new life with my young lover and the baby next year. I wonder how Amy would react when she finds out Michael has a son. She'll probably be so upset, my husband chuckled. The hurtful words and plans they discussed left me feeling devastated and betrayed. But no matter what she says, I'll choose Kate. Hearing their conversation, tears naturally started to flow from my eyes. Though I had sensed their lack of interest in me, I never imagined they were cheating, let alone that there was a pregnancy involved. My mind went blank. My mom was gently holding my hand, glaring sharply at the private room where the two of them were. Those two? They're unforgivable. They're planning to take over our new home, aren't they? That's incredibly audacious, I whispered in shock. We had been planning to move when our daughter started elementary school and were in the midst of building our own home. The land for the house was provided by my father, who works in real estate at a family discount. He also managed to get a construction company he knows to build the house at a lower cost. It seemed that my husband and mother-in-law intended to live in that house with his mistress. Lucky us for getting the house cheaply, thanks to her father, my husband commented. Living in a new house with a young lover is just the ultimate happiness, isn't it? Don't forget about me, my mother-in-law added. Of course. I know, Mom. I'll give you what would have been Amy's room. It's got great sunlight. You'll definitely like it, my husband replied cheerfully. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see my grandson. A child with Kate will surely be handsome, my mother-in-law remarked. That's right. A child of mine and Kate's will definitely have a bright future, my husband agreed. Hearing their conversation, I couldn't stop my tears and lost my appetite, so we decided to leave the restaurant. It turned out that my mom had recorded their conversation, perhaps as evidence. Afterwards, I didn't return home but went back to my parents' house with my mom, who comforted me gently as I broke down in tears. It must have been tough for you, Mom. I'm sorry, I apologized. Why are you apologizing, Amy? The ones at fault are Michael and his people who betrayed you, not you. I can't forgive them for making. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't let my precious daughter suffer, I whispered in a low voice. My mom gently stroked my head with a kind smile. That's good. I was worried about what to do if you wanted to continue your married life with Michael. If things kept going as they are, Michael would likely initiate a divorce in a way that puts you at a disadvantage, maybe even demand alimony, my mom explained. What? But I didn't cheat, I exclaimed. But now that you know you've been betrayed, you can take the initiative. Don't worry, I'm here with you, she assured me with a smile. My mom has always been a dependable person. She was assertive when I faced harassment at school. I've always admired her since I was young. So I decided to proceed with a divorce advantageously and hired a detective agency to investigate my foolish husband. Thinking I was completely oblivious, Michael was openly cheating. Additionally, I decided to gather evidence myself and planted a voice recorder in his car. Every Saturday, he would leave the house claiming to hang out with colleagues. I was sure he was meeting his mistress on those days, so I set it up. It was incredibly easy to gather evidence. Listening to those recordings, I realized how much I was looked down upon. Are you sure your wife isn't getting suspicious about us meeting every week on the same day? Michael's mistress asked. Don't worry about it. She believes everything I say. I'm sure I can easily fool her about alimony and child support. I don't want to give those women a single penny, Michael replied callously. Yeah, that makes sense. We have our future life to think about. The old hag can just drop dead for all I care, his mistress remarked. You really say some terrible things, but Michael, you always say that too. I should have never married that awful old woman. Why did you marry her in the first place? She continued. I saw her photo, and to be honest, she's not even pretty. I must have been out of my mind back then. If I'd met you earlier, I wouldn't have given a woman like that a second glance. I'm so happy. I love you, Michael. I love you more than anything in the world, she declared. Hearing those hurtful conversations confirmed my decision to end my marriage. After hearing those intimate sounds in the car during the recordings, my sadness disappeared, replaced only by anger. They completely looked down on me, but of course I had no intention of letting them have their way. I continued to gather evidence with my parents' help. After receiving additional proof from the detective agency, I was ready to confront my husband about a divorce. I told my husband and mother-in-law that I needed to discuss something important and called them. My parents offered to accompany me, but I decided to confront them alone. This was my problem, and I wanted to resolve it myself. When the two of them showed up, they looked annoyed. What's this important talk about? We're not so free to attend to your whims. Yeah, you're interrupting our day off. I had plans for a lunch date with friends, my mother-in-law complained. I'm sorry. I just really needed to talk to you, I replied. So what is it? Make it quick. I handed my husband the divorce papers with a serious expression. My name was already filled in. For a moment, they were speechless. What's this all about? Why are you bringing up divorce? I can't continue with you anymore. Please divorce me, I explained. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law burst into laughter, followed by my husband. What are you talking about? All of a sudden, divorce me? You can't live without me. Exactly, know your place. I'd understand if Michael wanted a divorce, but it's ridiculous coming from you, my mother-in-law mocked. It doesn't matter who initiates the divorce, does it? And without Michael, how do you plan to live? You're just a housewife, and he's been supporting you financially. Are you planning to live homeless with your daughter? Homeless mother and daughter, huh? That would be quite a sight, my husband sneered. They began to mockingly laugh at me and my daughter. Seeing them like that, I almost lost my composure, but I held back. I will be demanding alimony from Michael and, of course, child support as well, I declared firmly to my husband. What? What are you talking about? I can't understand child support, he stuttered in disbelief. But why should I pay alimony? Don't you understand what alimony means? This is why I can't stand uneducated women. Of course I know what alimony means. I'm not that ignorant. So how exactly are you planning to get alimony from me? Give me a convincing explanation, Michael. I challenged. You're having an affair with a woman named Kate, right? And she's pregnant with your child? I stated, mentioning the mistress's name. This caught my husband and mother-in-law off guard. They clearly didn't expect that I knew about the affair, but they weren't the type to give in just because of that. What? You knew about Kate? My husband admitted. Yeah, I admit it, but it's your fault you were cheated on. Why is it my fault then? I demanded. My mother-in-law started talking. It's because you only gave birth to a girl. You didn't try hard enough for a second child. If you had just gotten pregnant with a healthy boy, Michael wouldn't have left you. It wasn't that I didn't try. I couldn't. After our daughter was born, Michael didn't help with childcare or housework at all. How could I even think about having another child under those circumstances, especially when it was my first time raising a child? I explained. What nonsense is this girl talking about? Childcare and housework are a woman's job. You're wrong to rely on a man like Michael. Maybe your attitude is why he got fed up with you, my mother-in-law retorted. Hearing my mother-in-law defend her son who cheated and impregnated another woman, I was more astonished than angry. I couldn't believe I had put up with such unreasonable people for so long. My husband continued to berate me. You gave up being a woman after marriage. You stopped wearing makeup, and after giving birth, you quickly aged. Who would want to have a child with an old hag? It's your fault for losing your feminine charm. True, after childbirth, I stopped focusing much on makeup or hairstyles, but I maintained basic grooming. Many women gain weight after childbirth, I responded, defending myself against their hurtful accusations. But I was careful not to, and it seemed my husband never noticed these efforts. Caught up with his young mistress, he had no interest in me. Continuing to mock me, I made a request. Can you bring Kate here? I'd like to meet her, I asked. What? Why? She knew you were married and still had an affair, right? She also has a responsibility. I want to have a talk with her, I explained. Meeting Kate will only hurt you more, my husband replied. Why would that be? Well, Kate is young and has a great figure, unlike you. Plus, she's carrying a boy in her belly, something you couldn't give me. You might just lose it out of jealousy, he sneered. I don't care about that. Just call her, please, I replied coldly. My husband seemed displeased that I didn't react the way he expected. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and started calling his mistress while intermittently glancing at me. He deliberately put the phone on speaker mode so I could hear their conversation. Hey, what's up? Are you coming over today? I need to apologize to Kate about something, he said. What? What's going on? I'm scared, Kate replied. Turns out my wife found out about us. I want you to come over, he explained. Meeting your wife? That's scary, Kate responded. It's fine. I love you, Kate, and I'll protect you, my husband reassured her. If that's the case, I'm relieved. I've wanted to meet her too, so sure, Kate said naively. About 30 minutes later, Kate arrived at our house. She was dressed inappropriately for the situation, wearing a shoulder-bearing shirt and a miniskirt. She was a 25-year-old temp worker at my husband's company. We invited her in to continue the discussion. Despite my presence, my husband and his mistress began to flirt with each other. Kate is young and attractive, unlike someone else here. Even pregnant, she takes care of her appearance, my husband remarked. Hey, don't say that. You'll make your wife angry, Kate joked. Oh, I guess she's not your wife anymore. Sorry for taking your husband. Kate smirked at me, clearly looking down on me. Then my mother-in-law compared us. Kate is young and beautiful, unlike Amy. Plus, she's giving us the boy we always wanted. She's feminine and charming, unlike someone else here. I really like her, my mother-in-law remarked. I'm so happy to hear that from you. I like you too, Kate replied, flaunting their relationship as if to show off to me. However, I wasn't affected by their display. I turned to my husband and Kate and resumed the conversation. I'm sure you're aware, but I'll be seeking alimony from both of you, I insisted. Alimony? You're still on about that. Did you think you could just come up with some excuse to avoid paying alimony? Did you think if you manipulated me enough, you wouldn't have to pay? My husband scoffed. Hey, wife, you're scary, he added nervously. As I pressed them, Kate dramatically clung to my husband, who soothingly stroked her head. It's okay, I'll protect you, Kate, my husband said, uttering such a cheesy line that it made my skin crawl. How did I ever fall in love with and choose to marry such a man? Now, I couldn't understand why I married him in the first place. Do you understand that if a married person commits adultery, they're obliged to pay alimony, right? I questioned. Kate knew you were married and still got involved with you, correct? I have the right to demand alimony from both of you, I continued. Sure, we're together, but do you have any physical evidence? My husband challenged. You think I don't have anything? I have all the evidence I need, I declared. I laid out the investigation report from the detective agency and photos of their affair on the table. I also played the recordings from the car and a conversation my mother had recorded at the sushi restaurant. My husband and mother-in-law were speechless, their eyes wide. How about that? I can do this much, I stated firmly. You were at the sushi restaurant? My husband asked, surprised. Yes, I was at the next table. I heard familiar voices and was surprised to see you and your mother there, talking so loudly in the restaurant, I explained. Seriously? No way, my husband seemed visibly shaken by this revelation. My mother-in-law, too, was speechless, probably trying to think of a way to escape paying alimony. Then Kate spoke up, seemingly oblivious to the seriousness of the situation. Even if we have to pay alimony, we have the new house, so it's no big deal. If we run out of money, we can just sell the house. It's quite a mansion after all. It should sell for a good price, she remarked smugly. Her attitude was more irritating than infuriating. I decided to enlighten her about a certain truth. You seem to be making plans for that house, but I won't let you have it, I replied. What are you talking about? My husband retorted. I'm the one who paid for that house, didn't I? You didn't pay anything, and now you want to take over. Have you forgotten under whose name that house was built? I revealed, causing my husband's face to turn pale as he remembered the truth about the house's ownership. However, Kate, not grasping the situation, still thought she had the upper hand. I know you were looking forward to the new house, but please give up. It's going to be my home now. There's no place for you there. If you really want to live with us, maybe you can stay in a doghouse or something, Kate said, laughing. My husband, on the other hand, was clearly panicking. What's gotten you so pale all of a sudden? He asked nervously. Well, actually, that house was built under Amy's father's name, I revealed. What does that mean? My husband asked. It means it won't belong to us, I replied. What? So we get nothing, my husband realized. You both will only have the alimony to pay, and Michael, you will also pay child support for our daughter, I informed them. My husband suddenly stood up, begging. Please, I intend to pay the alimony, but can we keep it around $20,000 for both of us? Don't decide that on your own. I'm going to let professionals determine the amount of alimony. I'll claim as much as I can squeeze out of you two. Please have mercy. I don't have the means to pay alimony right now, especially with a child. My ex-husband pleaded. It seemed that my ex-husband had been spending a considerable amount on his mistress. He was never the type to save money, and with his show-off nature, he always wore only expensive items. He probably lavished his mistress with high-end brand gifts and extravagant dates. Indeed, working at a major corporation, he earned a higher salary compared to others his age. However, his expenses far exceeded his income, making it pointless. It appeared that he didn't even have savings of about $20,000 left. Realizing this, the mistress stood up, shocked and furious. Wait a minute. If you have no money, there's no point in marrying you. You've wasted my time, Kate exclaimed. What are you talking about? That's my line. I chose you as a marriage partner because you seemed well off. If you don't have money, there's no point. And if we can't have the mansion, there's no reason to marry. I'm calling off the engagement, my husband declared. Are you serious? My ex-husband asked. I had anticipated this turn of events. Having learned a particular fact about her from the detective's investigation, I decided to reveal the truth to my husband, who was sitting alone, shocked and distraught. You know, Kate's been involved with 3 other men besides you, Michael. She chose you because you seemed the most financially stable, I explained. When confronted, Kate sighed heavily, no longer bothering to hide her true intentions. Yes, that's right. I chose you because you seemed like the best target. I intended to keep seeing other men even after marrying you, Kate admitted. I thought you loved me, my ex-husband exclaimed. I did like your lavish lifestyle, Kate replied casually, but let's face it, you're a 38-year-old man and you have a strong old man smell. You're not exactly the handsome older man type. I never saw you as a man in that way, but when I showed a bit of interest, you fell for it so easily. I figured I might as well take advantage of you, Kate revealed. Hearing her true nature, my husband looked utterly betrayed, tears streaming down his face. Then my mother-in-law spoke up. But the child in your belly is Michael's, right? You'll give us the son, won't you? She asked. Honestly, I'm not sure if the child is Michael's. My intuition tells me it's more likely to be Kyle's child. But of course, we won't know for sure until we check. Kate responded casually. With that, the mistress abruptly ended the conversation and left the house. My husband remained crying with his head in his hands. After he stopped crying with red eyes, he turned to me and appealed. Can we just forget about the divorce? I promise I won't betray you again. Now you say this? You never cared about me or even looked at our daughter, I responded. I'll take care of both of you from now on. You're just scared of being alone, my husband pleaded. Sorry, but I have no intention of remarrying you. After hearing your conversation at the sushi restaurant, I was completely disillusioned with both of you. I had my doubts about you for a long time. I firmly rejected him. He started crying again, his emotions seeming out of control after being discarded by his mistress. Then my mother-in-law interjected. He's willing to try again, just go along with it. You're better off with Michael's income, aren't you? If you divorce now, remarrying will be difficult. Just drop this divorce nonsense, she insisted. You both betrayed me first. I'm fed up with a cheating husband and a malicious mother-in-law. I'm tired of dealing with you two. Let's handle the rest through lawyers. I'm going back to my parents' house, I said firmly, shaking off her hand and leaving the house. Wait. I want to live with you and our daughter, my husband pleaded, grabbing my leg, his face tear-streaked and distraught. I couldn't bear to look at his pitiful state. Goodbye. Enjoy your time with your mother, I said, leaving the house I had lived in for so long. With the help of a lawyer, the divorce was finalized. I claimed a lump sum in alimony from my husband and his mistress. Of course, I also demanded child support from my husband for our daughter, arranged to be a fixed amount paid monthly. The mistress, having no money, had her parents pay the alimony. She was scolded severely by them and left her job to return home. After giving birth, she lived under her parents' watchful eyes. Though she was there, her parents seemed decent, and knowing the child wasn't suffering brought me relief. My ex-husband continued to work, unable to quit due to his debts from the alimony payments. His affair with the temp worker naturally became known at work, leading to him being regarded coldly by his colleagues. He started making frequent mistakes at work, and as a result, his salary was nearly reduced by about $1,800. Moreover, for some reason, he blamed my mother-in-law for our divorce and severed ties with her. Since my mother-in-law had been receiving about $1,800 in support from my ex-husband each month, she faced financial difficulties once this support stopped and had to start working part-time, as her pension wasn't enough. As for me, I moved into the newly completed house with my parents. My daughter was overjoyed to live with her beloved grandparents. While raising my daughter, I began helping with my father's business. Now, I am living a stress-free and happy life. In the future, I hope to continue enjoying peaceful and bright days with my loving parents and daughter.